everybody, and welcome to Shaman's Way, and welcome to our short class on practical shamanism. Today we're going to go through various objects that are important to shamanic practice. The very first one I'm going to take you through are rattles and drums. So the first thing I like to do is smudge. So I like to use wooden matches, and I'll be going through smudge in a different hour of this class for us. We slowly go around the edge of the smudge. I use wooden matches because I don't want to use a lighter. It's not appropriate from my teachings. And we just let that burn out and just becomes a nice, beautiful smoke. Take our hands, however you like to bless your own self with the smudge. I like to make sure my own space is clear, my own body is clear, my mind is clear, my eyes see clarity, my voice seeks truth, my heart is purity of emotion. May I carry a light bundle. And then I like to also move through the chakras, and I like to also put the smudge on the ground and lift up my feet and smudge the bottom of my feet so I let the past go behind me, walk forward in a new way. I like to start off by smudging everything that I am going to use that day. So today we're going to talk about all of these different drums, who they are, what they mean, and it's important that they come in clear and clean. These are always in my own healing room, and at times they come out when I'm going to work with another house or work away from home doing shamanic work. And as you can see, there are 3 different drums that I'm going to talk about, and I also have 3 different rattles that I'm going to talk about. So we say prayers to the sacred beings that follow us in our journey and in our way. Say prayers of gratitude to the beings of smudge that clear and clean our sacred voices, our sacred friends. Say prayers to my voice that I may speak truth, that I may embark or impart wisdom that may be of use. May I do so objectively and openly. So then I just put it aside, and here we are, and we're going to chat about the joys of working with drums and the joys of working with rattles. Smudge is an important element, and like I said, we will be talking about that at another point in this particular class. So the first one I want to talk about is my favorite drum, and this is my oldest drum. And in March of 2021, this drum will be 34 years old. This drum was given to me as a gift. The only drum I have bought or put money towards is the black drum that I'll chat with you about later. But this drum has been a leader for many types of circles, for many types of healing work, for journeying over many terrain, to working over top of a person's body during healing work, to using it as a form of divination and using the various instruments or the sticks that you use, the drumsticks that you use. Some people call them beaters. I really don't know what the right word is, even after all these years. Beater sounds bad, domestic violence affects many of us, so beater to me has a different connotation. Drumstick, is about the most appropriate, I guess, in my language. So the very first thing I want you to do when you pick up your drum or when you purchase a new drum is I want you to say hello to your drum. So we pick it up and we wake up our drum. It's our way of opening and connecting to the energy of the drum. It's our way of waking up our gentle friend. It isn't like you're going to go up to your child, your spouse, your partner, your best friend, and whack them to wake them up. You're going to, most of you, not every time, because, we all have a sense of humor, and wake it up as gently as you would your partner or a person that you loved. Or I love this drum. I love all the journeys that we've taken together. I love the relationship that we have. The energy that is stored in this drum is quite phenomenal. It is a healer for me, even when it is not being played with the sticks. It has been a way of calming my lower back or my back. If I have pain, I will put my drum in the drum case, slide it over top my back, and walk around the house or walk around the neighborhood. And the healing power of the drum is enough to loosen those muscles and loosen my legs and help. So I find it as an active healer as much as it is on its own, as much as it is a healer when it's used in partnership with myself, or myself and my whistle, or myself and my voice. The drum is reminded of being the horse, or to the Sami people, the reindeer. It is a way of traveling, or it is a companion that will take you from this world to that world and back. This is the companion that is the background noise, the what I call candy for the conscious mind when we're doing the journey work. So when we do a journey work, when we're working with the drum, it's just a very simple, it's just habitual to say hello to the drum. And then for me, it's very gentle, 10 beats. For me, that's a way of waking it up. And different drumsticks will have a different sound. This one is quite heavy, so it has a very different sound than this one, which is quite light and made of foam. So these are the things you want to consider when you are creating your own drumstick, or if your drum comes with a drumstick, how can you make it your own? How can you create a partnership with the drum? And then this is another one. So they all have a different way of creating sound by their own weight, their own materials. Where you hit on the drum creates an entirely different sound as well. These are all important aspects and tools of the drum. The drum does take, there's supposed to be a beat of 180 to 220 beats per minute. I don't believe that I necessarily achieve that speed by any stretch of the imagination. What I do know is that it is the monotonous rhythm, and it is the faster rhythm, and the faster the rhythm, the more it works on slowing down the theta waves that we alter in order to perceive another form of reality. So the drum being the friend, the drum being the one that takes us through one world to another world, it has been, where does it take you? How does it take you? Where does it take you to get there? It is a different type of journey than when we talk about the rattles, how the rattle is going to be a different journey in and of itself. I like the drum also as a way of working on a person's body. So if this was a healing table and I was going to work with a person and work with how they feel, and my drum is a healer, so is yours. So just hitting it or beating with it over top of the person. Pretend this is the head and this is the belly, and coming at it this way, creating creates a different rhythm and a different sound that goes over top of the person that you're working on, if you're working in a healing capacity. The rhythm of the drum, the vibration of the drum goes through the person's body. It is very relaxing for the person receiving the sound of the drum, as well as it, I think, relaxes the body in and of itself. So the rhythm of that can vary from having that very monotonous rhythm to having a little bit of play. Whatever fun beat or rhythm that you want to create or you want to work with. And also keep in mind that the drum will ask you to play the rhythm that it wishes to play. And many times over many circles that I've had, I have heard many people exclaim that the drum took over and they played the rhythm of that. Or when you are working on a particular person, whether they're laying down or they're standing up, you will find that the drum will locate places on the physical body that it wants you to stop on. Perhaps it's the low back, it could be the feet if they're standing up, or even if they're laying down. So the drum is a very intuitive healer in and of itself. In fact, when I was being introduced to the drum and the work of the drum and the abilities of the drum, the teacher that I had at the time showed us how the drum will lead you from one person to another person. So we would sit in a circle, and then two people would hold the drum with one finger and one finger, regardless of whether the drum is round or the drum is shaped like mine is. And to rest the drum on just your fingers, that's it. And then another person comes behind and uses their drum to make a rhythm or a sound behind this drum. So it would be like, and this drum is in front. And what is fascinating is that the drum has the ability to absolutely lead you in a direction one way or the other way. And I was demonstrating this at a wilderness workshop that I had taught at. And the drum eventually got very annoyed with us, and you could see the energy of the drum just tip it. So it was up like this, and then my drum just laid down flat on the ground. And if you were a person who resists sacred, or you resist that, and you'd think, oh, that's not really happening, it really wouldn't matter, because the drum is telling you, put me down. And the expression on the people who are holding the drum went from, this is a fun exercise, to, oh my goodness, this is so super real. And the drum laid down and was done. And that teaches us that aspect of respect. When we are in rhythm with a drum, when we are in relationship with a drum, that drum has a voice all of its own. You are the caretaker of that voice. You are the cooperative member of that voice. You are a voice that leads and shows and moves forward with the drum. And they all have a very different voice. So this drum has sometimes a high-pitched voice. Now, if you live in a cold climate or a dry climate, you might notice your drum starts to get that really ding sound to it, where it for me, as a person who's drummed for a long time, my preference is for the lower bass. I'm not really a huge high-pitched drum kind of gal, but that's my preference. That may not be your preference. But the skin, when it makes that very high-pitched sound, is very taut. It's very tight. And in order to prevent the cracking or the chipping, but primarily the cracking and the breaking of it, is what I do is I just pour water from the tap in the back and I swirl it around to make sure that, for me, it's a matter of seeing that the water has gone everywhere on the back of the drum, or take my hand and wet it, and then just pour out the excess water and wait a minute or two to then use your drumstick to play it. And that will help to relax the skin. That will help to make it go from a high-pitched sound to a lower-pitched sound, So this drum is made of cowhide, which doesn't retain a great deal of moisture. I know that you can use bear grease and shea butter and various different types of oils to loosen up the drum. I've never used that because I have a very sensitive sense of smell, and if something is gone a little bit rancid or there's a scent I don't quite like, it will, well, we all have our rhythms, right? We all have things that we just don't like. And I just don't like smells that I just don't like. That's all I'm going to say about that. So this one has a very different sound, and it is very sacred, and it is very old, and I did have to repaint it. And the way that this is a Celtic fire dragon, the way that this particular design was placed on the drum was the person who made me this drum passed me a sheet of paper with 4 pictures on it, and I chose this drum, and he just said, okay. And unfortunately I'm a little intuitive, so I knew right then and there he was making me a drum, and I was like, darn it, I wish I could be surprised. I acted surprised when he gave it to me, obviously, but that's how this came to be. And being a person that is an Aries, a fire sign, the fire makes a lot of sense to me. I did spend a great deal of my shamanic path so far on the south of the medicine wheel, and I have taken in many of the lessons of south. So this was a very fitting, intuitive choosing of a sacred symbol. I've only had to repaint it once, and you can see all the different hit marks of it, and it has its own bossiness to it. It's a very bossy drum from my perspective. So and the other aspect of this drum that I like is many people have reported to hear voices or trains or choirs when you are drumming for the sake of spirit. So if you're drumming for a journey, or if you're drumming for the sake of bringing up your spirit song, or you're even just drumming around the campfire, a sacred object brings in sacred sounds, brings in sacred voice, brings in sacred. And I think it is beautiful that we recognize the sacred comes in. Please don't talk yourself out of it. So if you hear in the background a train roaring, or if you hear a choir singing, or you hear a didgeridoo or some other instrument going, please know that that spirit joining in with you in the rhythm and the song of your soul, and in the rhythm and the song to allow them to enter from one space to this space and go back from this space to that space. There are the different types of skin, obviously. This one I refer to as my water drum. And the reason for that is I have yet to hear this drum go tingy. And today it is minus 27 centigrade, so it is very dry outside. So if I hadn't wet this drum yesterday when I was using it, it had that really, really high-pitched sound. So I put water on it and then put it in the drum case so that it keeps its moisture. But this one sounds great today. And this drum I will utilize for different types of spaces. So my oldest drum has been in more circles than any other of my other drums all combined. So the people who have been with me for many years through journeys, through ceremonies, through rituals, through drumming circles, through classes, they've heard this drum and very familiar with this drum. One day I brought this to circle and I used this drum. What was interesting were the people that had built a relationship to my old drum had a more challenging time journeying to this rhythm or this sound because it was, as one person put it, it was unfamiliar. I wonder also if it isn't the relationship I have with this drum is less intense and has less length of time than this one does. So our energy to create a journey may be different than the energy that I have with my oldest drum. This drum I like to use in larger spaces. I do like to use it outside. If I feel that there is a very tight or intense tightness or dryness in the body, I will use this drum over top of a person's body because, as I said, it reminds me of water. It's a water drum because it never dries out for me. And so if there's something dry, so a dry cough or a dry heaving or the feeling of, not enough humerus, not enough moisture in the body, then I use this drum as a way of bringing the energy of water or moisture from the skin downwards. So everything can be moisturized. Everything can be brought back to a normal moisture balance. And it has a very deep sound. So the depth of the frame itself does also affect the depth and the sound of the drum. The more narrow this is, generally the more high-pitched sound that it is. I mean, obviously, the thicker it is, the sound waves are going to move very differently through all of these. Now, for myself, I've had people ask me, do you place your drum face up or face down? And I think that really depends on you. This drum likes to go face down. This drum likes to go face up. So I generally put that drum face up. And it generally hangs on the wall in my spirit room. So it is forever out and it has its own reverb. And sometimes if I'm utilizing one of the other two drums in healing in the healing room, that drum might answer with its own vibration. Very rarely, but it does. And I've noted that there are very specific circumstances for when that drum comes into play, which is how I have come to realize that that drum helps when it is in that dry state, in that dry place within the body, or within, the illness state of the body. Now this drum is not a natural head. As you can see, well, you may not be able to, it says Remo, and Remo is a brand name for synthetic head drums. The reason that I like the synthetic drum is because I like to drum outside. These drums, although great, if you encounter an evening with humidity, your drum is going to sag and lose its rhythm and its sound unless you place it over top of a fire or you have a heat source to keep it dry. And that's very important if you are outside and if you have your drum and you've gone camping or you're going to go camping, that you put your drum either in a drum case, or if you happen to have your vehicle close by, then put it in your vehicle. I have seen the dew and the moisture that gathers at night really affect drums. I've even seen it twist frames. So I would, if you've invested any time or any amount of coinage in your drum, or invested any spirit in your drum, I strongly recommend that you take care of it, because like anything, they can be quite fragile and they have a life of their own. And you may find that once it's truly been warped very badly, the skin becomes stretched, and if you're not comfortable with getting it wet again, stretching it back over top of the frame and putting it back on the frame, then you may have a drum, if you're not interested in doing those things and fixing your drum, then you may have a drum you'll never use again, which is really quite a shame, because they are beautiful spirits and they are made to be played. So this is the last drum. This is the synthetic one. I did not wake that one up as much because I was using it earlier and I wanted to see whether or not it had a voice. So I didn't wake it up because I'd already said hello to it earlier today. In case you were just wondering if I'm a rule breaker of my own rules, then that could well be. You never know. And although this drum has different sounds depending on where it is struck. It doesn't have quite the same variance of sound as, say, the high drum does. So the high drum has very different sounds. So there are different ways, there are different sounds to it, where the Remo head has a more uniform sound. And what it is very important for, as I was getting on with moisture, is that it isn't affected at all by moisture. It isn't affected whether or not you leave it outside or how you store it. The drum in and of itself, the makings of the drum, the casing of the drum isn't going to be harmed in those instances. Again, it's your relationship with your drum, so however you choose to treat it is your choice. It's up to you how you are going to work with that drum. So here we are. This one also I use over top of the person, and I like it because it has a very different rhythm, and I find this one really breaks up the illnesses in the body or shakes the body up. This one, possibly because of the depth of the frame itself and the low sound of this drum, the very, very, very bass sound of this drum, it does have a very strong calming effect. And what I've noticed with this drum is if a person's energy is all over the place, this drum helps to coalesce everything, bring it all back together, let it flow a little bit more evenly. So I may have a hyper person when they come, and then as soon as this drum starts over top of their body, they become a quieter or less hyper, or those aspects come into play there or are lessened in that regard. So the sound of the drum affects how you have a relationship with it. If you're going to purchase a drum, make sure that you do play it and that the sound is something that you can resonate with, because not every drum is your drum. Not every instrument is your instrument. Not every healing is your healing. So it just applies. So use your intuition. If it takes you a long time to get a drum, then it takes you a long time to get a drum. It took years for a drum to come to me. The other aspect of it is, if you are making your own drum, there are many different places. I don't know where you live, but there are different places that hold drum making workshops, and that is another avenue for making your drum. I haven't made any of my own drums, so I don't know what that feels like. I've been very fortunate to receive many drums over the years, and in fact received enough drums that I have been able to gift drums through the years to people who were in need or wanted a drum. My understanding very early on was that you never paid for a drum, you receive drums as gifts, and that's how the drum comes to you. I don't think that does have to apply to you. That did apply to me, and as I'd said earlier, the only drum I've put any money towards is the Remo drum, is the black drum, and that too was part barter and part cash. Not that so it is how your relationship with the drum begins. What is your relationship going to be like? And that can take time. One of the other aspects, I'll cover this a bit more in the smudge section, but to always keep medicine in your drum case. Medicine could be a braid of sweetgrass, it can be lavender, it can be sage, it can be resin. The intention of that is that you are housing, you have a beautiful spirit right beside you, coming at your beck and literal call, and therefore to feed that spirit in gratitude and know that that spirit has something to devour, to feed itself, and it's good medicine. So to feed medicine to a being or an instrument that provides medicine for you, I was taught was one of the most important things that you can do with the spirits. And I like the relationship between the various drums. And some drums don't get along. And I know that sounds kind of kooky, possibly, to some of you. But there are some drums that just do not get along. I have drums that can only be in this area of the closet. And then this old drum, as you can imagine, is very bossy and doesn't really allow any other drum besides a singing drum that I have out with it. So it is interesting to hear them and to pay attention to what they have to say. And that is also a matter of interpretation and a matter of being open, quote unquote, no pun intended, to the sound of that drum, to the voice of that drum, to the requests of that drum. So the drum is a tool for traveling from one place to another place. The drum is something that can be worn, as in my case, for a healer. The drum is your companion for healing work, has different voices. The drum is the companion for healing over top of other people or behind them. The drum is a companion for divination, to use as a means, almost like a pendulum in a way, but it moves from person to person or place to place. So the drum is a form of divination as well. The relationship between you and your drum: smudge your drum, talk to your drum, allow your drum to play you instead of you constantly playing the drum. If you're doing shamanic journey work and you do it on behalf of others, the one thing that I constantly say about my drums is my drum never lies. And it is sometimes the fault of my own interpretation of what I see, but my drum only takes me to the truth. And I have blind faith that it is an absolute trust that my drum will take me wherever I need to go and show me what I need to be shown. And at times when I come out of a journey, I may have a metaphor or symbol or something that I might not interpret or know exactly how to interpret at that point in time. But the stories that I see, the visions that I see, are accurate, and I do trust them. So I hope that you are able to trust your drums when you have the opportunity to move into utilizing your drum for whatever. And if you're in the process of wanting to make your own drum and there aren't drum classes available to you, there are options online. There are drum making kits that you can buy from various places online. Some people rescue them from pawn shops. I have tried to rescue drums from pawn shops. They didn't sound like the right kind of drum for me, because I would have taken those drums in, cleaned them up, cleared them up, and then kept them as foster kids and sent them on their way when they were mature and ready to go. So what do I mean by cleaning your drum? If you receive your drum secondhand, smudging your drum is very important, and also leaving it on this side of the glass, on the inside of your house if possible, and allowing the moon, whether it be a new moon or a full moon or go from cycle of moon to moon, to also utilize that you use the moon as a way of cleansing and clearing it. The other thing that I like to do anytime a new instrument comes into the house is I like to journey to the spirit of that particular drum or rattle or whatever comes into the house to see if there is anything on it or around it that I need to clear or be aware of. Does it have, and then I can ask it preferences. Do you have a particular place you want to be, you want to be seen and hung on the wall like this water drum does? It wants to be seen and wants to be out on the wall. This drum likes to be kept in its case. For many years it was out in the healing room, and now I go between two drums. So if it's not being use that date, then it asked to be placed in the case and zipped into its case and kept quiet in there. So that I respect that. So journeying to the drum or the rattle to find out what it is that you might have to do with it. And there may be a clearing on it. So that may include prayers, that may include different types of waters, a moon water or a salt water, or whatever isn't going to harm that. The skin of the drum, one way or the other, is what I would use. And I strongly believe in speaking to the spirits that are in the instruments that we use. And if I feel there is a spirit in that particular instrument that I'm either looking at for another person, then I might speak to that spirit to move it on. People will also bring their drums to me that have never been awoken, never been used in sacred space. So I've had the opportunity to bless drums and wake drums up. And so the blessing of the drum is usually an impromptu set of words. I don't have a prayer memorized for it. The reason I don't use memorized prayer in this regard is because each drum, each rattle has its own personality. With its own personality, it's going to speak differently. It's going to have a different song, it's going to have a different rhythm, it's going to have a different voice. So indeed, it has a different prayer. I respect the individuality of what comes through my door. That may be far-fetched for some of you, and maybe one day it won't. Maybe it'll be near-fetched and not far-fetched. I don't know. I don't know where your relationship is with any of the spiritual accoutrements that we use, or paraphernalia is a word that I'm quite familiar with and quite enjoy. So those are the ways that I use to cleanse the drum, and I like to use whatever that drum requests, whether it's being cleansed by the air, being cleansed by water, being cleansed by smoke, being cleansed by my own breath, my own prayers, being cleansed by a journey, and finding out the history of the drum, speaking the history of the drum back to it. You were made by, you were made here, and just remembering the history if you know the history of the drum as well. And what is that story going to be? If people ask you, what is the story between you and your drum? And can that story be a story of friendship and relationship, or will it forever be that remaining block of this is a drum and I am a human and I as a human use this drum? So whatever relationship you have is entirely up to you, and speaks your language, speaks to you, and that is absolutely perfect. Now, what I also wanted to talk about were rattles, and the different types of rattles that I have brought here all have a different voice. Each of the rattles here have come from their own places and have their own background story. I do know the story of this one. I bought these ones for, that's different. I don't know why it is that I can buy rattles but I can't buy drums, but I think because there's, from my perspective, there's a deeper relationship between the drum and myself. Although I love my rattles and I like to use rattles in lots of different ways, I do have a deeper relationship with the drum than I have with the rattle. The rattles stay out. I also have a big bag of rattles that I'll take to and from drumming circles if someone doesn't have an instrument. Then I have those rattles or click sticks or whatever instruments I have in order to help them. So why do I have different rattle sizes? There are times when the rattle, if I'm in a large drumming circle, say there are 40 drums, and that may be small to you, but say there are 40, 45 drums going, one of the things I absolutely love to do is take the opportunity not to drum, because I'm constantly drumming, and to bring out a rattle. Now this one, as you'll see, has a very large sound. So it's heard and it's loud on my ear. It has its own opportunity to be heard in a large group of drums. So someone on the other side of the circle may not hear my rattle, but rattles have a really important place in any drum circle, in any bringing up the spirit song. Rattles for me are rattles and whistles. They are synonymous for me. I was introduced to my first rattle was a 7-Up can with dried peas and electrician's tape over top of it. And that was my first rattle. And then I received another rattle that is in the process of getting fixed because I was drumming with, or I was using 2 rattles at the same time, and I wasn't paying attention. My eyes were closed, and I smacked one rattle against the other, and I broke my old man. But he's getting repaired. I tried to repair it, but it didn't work so well. So someone who is craftier than I is in the process of reclaiming my rattle. So I'm quite happy about that. So I received that rattle as a gift, and it has shifted and changed over the years because the handle has been broken. Various things have happened to it. So I've had to doctor it and have it fixed over time. So of course it had to break again. It's just this journey that I have with this rattle. And he's my old man, and I'm not willing to let him go. So that relationship is deep, but it's different than these rattles. What I really like about this rattle is that it has a surface, it has a divot or a deep into it. I like that because then I can use it over top of the body, and I can move the rattle around and it still makes a sound. So if I'm rolling around on the person's body, then this brings it very close up. And because it has a semi-flat surface, I can go around the body and use it as a way of cleansing the body off. So I use this if I'm in the healing room and I have a particularly large something stuck, then I might use one of these. But before I get into that, part of the reason that rattles are still used is because they represent different voices to different people. What I first started to talk about was rattles for me were, and then I got sidetracked by talking about my old man rattle, but they were the very first way that I was taught to bring in the directions was just to use your rattle and a whistle. And that was how we brought in the energies of the directions and the upper world and the lower world. And then we would all pick up our instruments and bring up our spirit song, which was homage to the 7th direction, spirit, the 7th element of spirit. So that's how we dealt with, or we worked in all of the elements. So the rattles for me are a way, kind of like the bells that I wear, are a way of saying to the spirits, hey, check out for us, we're on our way. I'm letting you know by whistling to you and by the cacophony of small sounds that I'm on my way to you. And I also see it when I use the whistle and the rattle, I also see it as a welcoming of spirit to cross over. I think the sound is a bridge for spirits to cross over. So the sound of the rattle is, and the whistle is the sound of that creates steps in a way. From me, from a metaphorical perspective, from a spiritual perspective, a psychic perspective, that spirits walk in on the waves of sound or on the steps of sound, however I feel at that time. But that's my interpretation of it. The 3 different rattles that I choose because they have 3 different sounds. The reason I choose 3 different sounds is because we all have varying degrees of what we will or will not tolerate for pitch, for duration, and for sound, because sound can be really annoying for some people. Some people really don't like the sound of the rattle at all. The rattle for me has been associated with areas where there is rain, and the rain sound is a way of cleaning the body, cleansing the body, letting the body go. So I would rattle over top if I feel that a person needs a good washing or a good cleansing. where we talked about the water drum as being something that is used to bring water to something that is dry, the rattle for me brings water to something that needs to be cleansed or cleaned or cleansed or taken away from the body. My understanding from what I have read is that rattles generally have appeared in countries where it was too moist for drums, or instead of using drums with hides, tree trunks or hollowed out tree trunks would often be used as drums, but the rattles were used as a means of also communicating with the spirits, to let them know you're coming and to celebrate and bring up spirit. I think the rattle is invaluable for journey work as well. It's a completely different type of journey, where the drum is at 180 to 220 beats per minute. This one there's a total different reality to the rattle, and it isn't that steady monotonous beat. It is that, I think, the continuous sound, that sonic driven, that one type of rattle that keeps going. This small one, very, very gentle, very, very gentle sound, whereas this one, again, a very loud sound, a very large sound. So rattles, they're used to bring in the spirits, so they're used for the directions. I use rattles also as a means of the invitation for water to come in to cleanse the area. I use rattles as a means of breaking down the exoskeleton, or the shell that is on top of a person's body, that energetic shell. I call it the psychic exoskeleton, and I use the rattle to help me break that. So there are times when I'll take my hand and I will put it over top of the person and then use the rattle and rattle into my hand, so that the rhythm or that vibration goes through the body itself. It doesn't hurt my hand, and I really am not interested in rattling on people's bones. I know that can be a little bit challenging and kind of painful, and I find that if I am painful or too painful in a healing, then the body has a tendency to freeze up or to close down and not be open and let me in, because I've just wounded it. And so someone has come to me for the healing of the wounding, they're attempting to open. So if I'm wounding, then I feel that the energy body can close up and just not allow me in, or not allow me in as deeply. I use the rattle, I was taught, as a way of sealing a person's body after doing a soul retrieval. So when I was taught to do the soul retrieval, after I blew the soul pieces back into the body, whether, in the beginning where I carried them, I don't know if that's how it's still taught at the foundation or not, but what I was taught initially is you grab it, you hold it to your chest, you come up, you don't let your hand down, you come up, you scoop it out, you blow it into the person. And then once you've blown the soul pieces in, then you take the rattle and you rattle around the person's body 4 times, and then you do the 4 sets of 7 in order to seal the energy body so the soul pieces don't escape out. I still practice that. Sometimes I use the drum. Most of the time I'll use the rattle. I use a lighter sounding rattle if I've just done soul retrieval, because I don't want to really activate the room or activate the energy, so to speak, because that energy that I've blown into them has to still settle and can be somewhat unsettling at times and can take up space. So I want to seal that energy body with a really gentle sound, or even a more gentle sound. When I teach different types of very simple journeys, I will use the rattle as opposed to the drum, because most people can get behind the idea that they can rattle and journey at the same time. It takes time for people to get behind the idea that they can drum and journey at the same time. Most people are not really comfortable with the rhythm that they make, or they're afraid they're going to mess up the rhythm, or whatever myriad of reasons that are totally valid for individuals not quite trusting their ability to drum themselves into journey. The rattle doesn't seem to have that same kind of effect. Most people can recognize their ability to journey utilizing or using the rattle quite simply and quite easily. When we do trance postures, some of them, very few of them, I would use the drum for. The way that I was taught to use trance postures is to use the rattle. So the rattle is that energy that seems to work when the body is put in a particular way or holding particular objects. So whatever we're activating, if they're meridians or if they're ancestral lines or whatever we're activating in the trances, in those postures, seems to be activated more readily by the sound of the rattle than it does by the sound of the drum. The slower ones that I would use the drum for are, the grandfather bear posture, grandmother bear posture. So those types of, slow and easier journeys, so to speak, to do, then I would use the drum for. And if I'm being asked, but for the most part, when I talk about trance postures, I do like to use the rattle. Now on Shaman's Way, just by signing up for the newsletter, you do get access to the drums, the drum tracks, and the rattle tracks. And we use the multiple rattles. I like the sound of it. I like to be able to journey to the rattle. I like trance postures. Although in trance postures, you wouldn't necessarily rattle for yourself because usually your hands are held in a particular way or your body is held in a particular way and you don't have the freedom to use the rattle for yourself. So therefore you would need someone else to rattle for you so that you can do the journey, or alternatively you could listen to the rattle track that is on Shaman's Way. So you can do that as well. So we can journey, we can heal with the rattle, we can move with the rattle, we can call in the elements with the rattle. I also use the rattle when I am doing house clearings, if it seems to be a pool of energy that has conglomerated or come together in an icky way. The rattle is a great opportunity or a great tool to just break that up and shake that up. The rattle is good, or the drum is good too, but the rattle is smaller and can get in between, maybe the furnace and the water heater, or behind those boxes where you feel something is back there. So the rattle being small is also good in that way. If I'm traveling to take a workshop and I don't always trust the availability of space for a drum, and I don't want to, because I use soft cases, I don't want my drum to go onto the conveyor belt and into an airplane that way. So I'm very cautious traveling with my drums. Rattles are very easy to travel with, which I really quite like about them. They don't, not that I'm worried about attention in airports if I'm carrying a drum. Tons of musicians walk through airports every single day. I'm not worried about what my drum will attract by any stretch of the imagination. I just have a very strong relationship to my drums, and I don't want them hurt or left behind. And the rattle is easier. It's smaller, it's more compact. I can put it in my particular bag without a problem. So I think that is all I have to say about the rattles and the drums as an introduction to practical shamanism. The rattles anyone can use them. Where do you buy them? I don't know where you live, and maybe you don't have a music store in town. Possibly you do, or possibly you know of a music store. And I would go to the music store and see what they have. This one I bought at a festival for like a multicultural festival. And I bought this at one of the tents, I believe a Congo tent. And these two I bought from a fair trade store called 10,000 Villages. Unfortunately, I heard that they're closing down in my city, which is devastating. because they did help to support lots of men and even more women from smaller communities to have cottage industry, to create objects of beauty. And like, this is a beautiful little rattle, and it has a little tiny twig or stick that sticks out that looks like a beak, and it is a cute little owl. The incredible colors on this one, this is hand painted, obviously, and I'm fairly certain, although I could be wrong, that it is likely hand carved as well. So this is an important part of the industry. And when we get involved in shamanism, or when we get involved in various practices, can we also think of how to incorporate those practices, those instruments, into our lives in the most ethical of ways that we possibly can, if we can, right? And there may be rattles at secondhand stores. I've seen lots of rattles at my Goodwill and other places like that. So there are no end of places where you can find things. And the similar with the drum, when you bring your rattle home, smudge it, talk to it, do a quick journey to it, find out if there is anything that you need to know, any particular way that it wants to be cleared or cleaned. So be sure to introduce yourself properly when you bring a rattle into the house. Make sure, if you can, if this is something up your alley, make sure that you introduce your instruments to one another so that they can be friendly. And I guess in essence that's about it for hour number 1, and I'll see you for part 2 of the upcoming. And in part 2 we're going to talk about portable altars and how to make one, and what can be switched in and out, and other things that I will tell you about next time. Thank you.